Nancy with Nancy's Nibbles of Life, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new around here, again, welcome. My name is Nancy, and I'm on the WW Personal Points program. My 0-point foods are turkey, lean chicken, fish and shellfish, popcorn, beans, eggs, and fruits and vegetables. So, welcome to the channel. You know, I have a great recipe for you today. I love taking advantage of our 0-point foods, and this recipe today really does just that. Are you ready to learn about my 1-point turkey and spaghetti recipe? You're gonna really love it. Before we get into the video, can I ask you to please like the video below, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't. We have tons of great WW content on this channel. Recipes, what I eat in a days, just awesome information for you along your journey. Okay, again, I think you're gonna really love this recipe. It has tons of simple ingredients, but 1 point for turkey meatballs and spaghetti. Incredible. Are you ready to see how it goes? Let's go. Okay, let's get started on our turkey meatballs and spaghetti. You're going to need 3/4 of a pound of the 99% fat-free ground turkey, a half of an onion, 4 or 5 cloves of garlic, a half a cup of bell pepper. You're also going to need 1 egg, and you're going to need some fresh flat leaf parsley, and you're going to need a half a cup of that. You're going to need 2 slices of a low-carb bread. I'm using the Kroger Carb Master bread. 2 slices of that. I love the Carb Master over at Kroger. You're also going to need a 15-ounce can of crushed Roma tomatoes or crushed tomatoes. You're going to need a tablespoon or 2 of some Italian seasoning, 1/8 of a teaspoon of both salt and pepper, and some cooking spray. And of course, you're also going to need a spaghetti squash. So, I love a spaghetti squash. You know, it's so versatile. You could do so many things with it. You see it in the grocery store all the time. If you've never tried one, this is how we're going to make our spaghetti for our turkey meatballs. So what you want to do is cut a little slice at the end so that you could hold it flat like you see that I am, and then slice it right down the middle. Now I got really lucky on this squash because it was so fresh, and so it made it really easy to cut open. So just make sure that you take your time, use a really sharp knife, and cut right through that spaghetti squash into 2 halves. And then you want to de-seed your spaghetti squash. So go ahead and rub a spoon through the middle of that spaghetti squash and get rid of those seeds. So some folks love to, roast and add a little bit of salt to these seeds so they don't throw them away. You could certainly do that. But for this recipe, we're just going to roast them. So I'm adding it to a cookie sheet lined with a little foil, adding a little protective layer of cooking spray on the top of that spaghetti squash, and we're going to roast it in the oven at 400 degrees for about an hour. So preheat your oven 400 degrees, and you want to just throw your spaghetti squash right in the oven. Okay, let's get started on the ingredients for our turkey meatballs. You're going to need a half an onion, like I said, and what you want to do is just dice your onion, but reserve a little bit of this onion along with your garlic in a small bowl. Maybe 1/4 of a cup of this portion. All right, so there we go. We're just adding our onions to our 99% fat-free lean turkey. And you see I've reserved about 1/4 of those diced onions. And do the same. So if you're going to cut up, or if you're going to mince 3 or 4 garlic, you want to reserve you 1 or 2. Just put them to the side. We're going to use that for something else. Okay, so I'm just using this little handy tool that I recently picked up, and I am mincing the garlic. And now I'm also adding my bell pepper to the fat-free or 99% fat-free turkey. So just dice your bell pepper. The mini bell peppers are so sweet, but use what you have. And you see that is about 1/3 of a cup. Okay, now we're going to use about 5 sprigs of this flat leaf parsley. Make sure you rinse it, get it nice and clean. And we're just going to give it a rough chop initially, but then we're going to kind of give it a fine dice. Now these are rustic meatballs, so it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I love the imperfect look of a meatball, don't you? It just kind of looks homely, and just I love a rustic meatball. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you see, you want to kind of get your flat leaf parsley chopped and minced pretty well. So there you go, about that consistency. And you want to add that to your meatballs. That little fresh bit of parsley really makes a difference in our meatballs. Okay, I mentioned to you that I'm using the Carb Master bread, the Kroger Carb Master. Just using the ends of that bread, I'm almost out. You could find low carb bread all over the place. This is 1 point a slice. I like the Carb Master bread over at Kroger because it saves me a little money, and I like the taste of it. So we're going to go ahead and cut the bread into croutons, kind of like a crouton. So just slice them and dice them. And we're going to add that to our turkey mix. So again, they are, sliced about the consistency of a crouton. So use some salt and pepper. I always say 1/8 of a teaspoon for the salt and pepper, but I also say that you're the cook. You know how to season your food. Some people may think I added too much salt or not enough pepper. You season the way that you like, what works for your palate. I am also using 1 tablespoon of a dried Italian seasoning, and I'm sure it's just some basil and parsley, and I got that also from Kroger, but you could find dried oregano and basil seasonings all over. So 1 egg, and we're gonna give this a stir, get all of those ingredients mixed well together. Looks nice and fresh. All right, I'm gonna have to go Tony Soprano style here, take off the ring and really mix this well. So remember, I said that this is a rustic turkey meatball, so doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to make sure we get our Italian seasoning and our salt and pepper and our egg mixed really well, and get those ingredients distributed evenly among the mix. Okay, please use an oven-safe skillet. We're going to roast these or bake them in the oven. So I'm adding a little bit of Pam to the skillet that I'm going to use to make our meatballs in. And so I'm just forming my meatballs and adding them to my skillet. So this mix makes about 7 meatballs, 6 or 7. It depends on how well or how big, I should say, you form your meatballs. But I believe we have 7 here. And again, this recipe is only 1 point. And of course, the points were generated from that bread. If you can believe it, everything else in this recipe is 0 points. It's such a great recipe. So again, your meatballs don't have to be perfect, but if you want to make enough to where each person gets 2 meatballs and you can serve about 3 or 4, that's good. So I'm just forming my rustic turkey meatballs and adding them to my skillet. And again, they're going to go in the oven. Here they are. You can see that bread, that flat leaf parsley, our peppers and onions. And they're a good size. All right, so looks good. Let's move on to the next step in our recipe, which is our tomato sauce. So remember I said to reserve a little bit of that garlic and onion? We're going to add it to our tomato sauce. So I've added a little pan to my pot here, and I'm just sauteing that onion and that garlic. So I love using fresh tomatoes as a tomato sauce, even a pizza sauce when I do the 2-point ingredients. The 2-point pizza dough. But the acidity in the tomatoes sometimes bother me. So I cook them down a little bit before I add them to anything. And so I did a 0-point cabbage roll recipe recently, and I did the same thing. So I'm just essentially cooking these tomatoes a little bit to kind of get rid of some of the acidity. And I'm adding salt and pepper and a little bit of that Italian seasoning. Again, maybe about 1 tablespoon of that Italian seasoning. And I'm going to just give this a stir and let it cook out a little bit to kind of get rid of, again, some of that acidity. So you see I have about a medium flame. I'm going to cook this maybe around 12 minutes and let it cook down. We're using the crushed tomatoes here because I like the consistency of this sauce. You don't want it too runny because it's gonna stand up well to our spaghetti squash if it's not too runny. And you want it to feel hearty. So the crushed tomatoes, in my opinion, are the way to go for this recipe. All right, it looks like our tomatoes have cooked down a little bit. We're just going to add them directly to our skillet with our meatballs. And then we're going to immediately add it to the oven. So your oven is already warm because it's been cooking your squash at 400 degrees. So you just want to keep it at that temperature and load in your meatballs. Right at the 400 degrees. So these are going to cook about a half an hour or so. Of course, you always want to check your food and see how it's doing. So after about maybe 15 minutes, I'm going to take a look at these meatballs. There they are. You see how the sauce has kind of thickened on us? That's what you want. But I'm going to go ahead and add a little water. You see, I'm checking to see the consistency of that sauce and flipping my meatballs over, which is a good idea. The garlic and the tomatoes smelled so good on these turkey meatballs. So go ahead and give them a flip, and I am going to go ahead and add about 1/3 of a cup of water, but I'm going to add that twice, so whatever that math is. So here is 1/3 of a cup of water, 2/3, and that's what you want to use because, again, we don't want it too runny, but you want it thick and hearty enough to add it to our spaghetti squash. Our spaghetti squash is kind of delicate, it's a little light, so you don't want to drown it in too much sauce. So here it is, just kind of working that sauce in, and I am making the decision whether or not I want to add a little more water, and I do. So I'm going to add my second 1/3 of a cup of water here. And now it looks good. And so I'm just going to go back and evenly distribute the tomato sauce in my skillet and throw it back in the oven for maybe another 20 minutes or so. Remember, it cooked about 15 minutes earlier, so that'll give us about a 35-minute cook time. Now I'm going to add my lid because I want to keep my meatballs moist, of course. So back in the oven. Okay, now let's start working on this squash. Look how golden and delicious this squash looks. The way that you could tell that it's done is if your fork goes easily into the flesh of that squash. You see how easy that fork is going in there? That's how you know that you have roasted your spaghetti well. If it's a little hard, that means you should cook it a little longer. And again, that stayed in there about an hour and 15 maybe. Just keep an eye on it. All right, so once your spaghetti squash has cooled enough for you to handle, I'm still using my oven mitt here. You just want to use a fork and fluff it from the sides, pull it from the sides, and you'll see it comes out very easily. And you see the look of that squash? It looks like spaghetti strands. And that's why it's called spaghetti squash. I love this squash, you know. It's not too strong of a flavor. If you love any flavor of squash or any kind of squash, you would love this spaghetti squash. Another great thing about spaghetti squash is that you could make it however you like. You could add a little butter, salt and pepper. That's also good. You could eat it plain, but I love spaghetti squash. Okay, our turkey meatballs are out of the oven. And I love, again, the rustic look to these meatballs. And I love the thick tomato sauce that we've created. It's just enough. Looks really good. Okay, let's get to plating up our delicious one-point dinner. So you want to go ahead and add a mound of this spaghetti squash to your dinner plate. Give it a twist like you would a pasta. And add as much as you like because it's 0 points. And it's really good for you. You're going to really like it. And now we're going to go ahead and add this wonderful tomato sauce. And you see why you want it kind of thick? You want it to stand on top of that spaghetti squash. You don't want to add too much water because it'll just be too runny on you. So there you go. Delicious. There are our meatballs stuffed with those peppers and those onions and the garlic and that fresh parsley. They're moist and delicious. Gonna go ahead and add a little decorative piece of that parsley, and there we are. A one-point dish. It's nutritious, it's delicious, and I think your friends and family are gonna love it. So nice. So of course I've added a little grated Parmesan to mine. You don't have to. But I, of course, wanted to add a little bit of cheese. Take a look at our meatballs, nice and moist. You see all of those peppers and onions there. Let's have a little bit of that sweet tomato sauce with our squash and our meatball. This is perfect. You don't need anything else. Let's give it a taste. It's really good. I hope you guys enjoyed that. What did you think about that recipe? You know, I had it for leftovers on the next day, and that tomato sauce got even sweeter. Using those crushed tomatoes, I think, really is key to this recipe. Well, that's it for today. Don't forget to give me a like and a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. Lots of good WW content. I bring you a video once a week, so I would love to have you stick around. Okay, that's it for this video, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Take care of yourself. Bye.